He sat in his own establishment, a gnawing hunger in his gut, utterly disregarded as his own team cast judgmental glances his way. The sole individual who offered a flicker of warmth was a waitress, blissfully unaware she was serving the very founder of the empire. For 3 decades, Gregory Lancaster had meticulously forged his culinary dominion. What began as a humble family-run bistro had blossomed into the prestigious Lancaster Grill, a sprawling network of upscale dining venues spanning the nation. His restaurants catered to an exclusive clientele, corporate titans, glittering celebrities and affluent families who expected nothing less than flawless service and an opulent atmosphere. Yet beneath the veneer of success, a disquieting truth began to surface. Complaints had begun to surface. Initially they were isolated incidents, a stray email, a fleeting social media comment. But over time the pattern became undeniable. Patrons reported his establishments treating less affluent guests with stark indifference, sometimes outright disdain. Whispers circulated of staff members ignoring cheap-looking customers, turning their backs on anyone not perceived as a generous tipper. Gregory had meticulously built his brand on a foundation of excellence, not merely in cuisine but in genuine hospitality. If his restaurants were failing in this fundamental aspect, it wasn't merely a business challenge. It was a profound personal affront. One evening from the solitude of his Phoenix penthouse, he scrolled through the latest grievance. "I entered the Lancaster Grill last night, simply hoping for a pleasant meal after a demanding day. My attire wasn't extravagant, but I possessed the means to spend. The staff regarded me as an outsider. Not a single greeting. I endured a 20-minute wait before anyone finally approached, and they made it abundantly clear I was not a priority. I departed feeling utterly humiliated. Improve your standards." Gregory exhaled slowly, placing his phone onto the polished marble. He had invested too much to allow such a stain on his legacy. He needed to confront the issue firsthand, and a clear strategy formed in his mind. The following morning he delved into his wardrobe, pushing aside tailored suits and designer jackets until he unearthed his chosen disguise: an old, faded flannel shirt and a pair of well-worn jeans. He pulled them on, the unfamiliar fabric enveloping him. Next came the subtle alterations. A rugged beard he'd allowed to grow for days, an old baseball cap pulled low, and a pair of scuffed sneakers long forgotten. He scrutinized his reflection. The multimillionaire CEO Gregory Lancaster was gone. In his place stood a weary, down-on-his-luck man desperately seeking a warm meal. But merely adopting the appearance wasn't enough. He needed to embody the experience. Before heading to the Lancaster Grill, he left his wallet at home, carrying only a few crumpled dollar bills. To genuinely test his staff's compassion, his affluence could not serve as a safety net. He opted for the bus instead of his customary black SUV, feeling the weight of every impatient sigh and judgmental stare from strangers who presumed he was merely another struggling individual with nowhere better to be. By the time he disembarked at the restaurant, the sun was beginning its descent, casting a golden hue over the building's sleek glass facade. This was it. He adjusted his cap, took a deep breath, and pushed open the doors to his own restaurant, this time as a mere nobody. The instant Gregory stepped inside, the atmosphere shifted perceptibly. The Lancaster Grill embodied every ideal of a high-end dining establishment: sophisticated lighting, elegant black and gold accents, and the subtle, inviting aroma of seared steak and truffle butter. Waiters in pristine uniforms moved with practiced grace, deftly balancing gourmet plates and perfectly poured wine glasses. But another, less tangible element permeated the air: a distinct, unspoken hierarchy. Gregory paused near the entrance, observing the staff's interactions with patrons. An impeccably dressed couple was greeted with genuine smiles and promptly escorted to a table. A man in a tailored suit barely uttered a word before a waiter smoothly pulled out his chair and presented a menu. Gregory, however, encountered a starkly different reception. A blonde hostess, likely in her mid-20s, cast a dismissive glance at him from her podium. Her eyes darted from his faded shirt to his scuffed shoes. No smile, no welcoming words. Just a barely parted, "Can I help you?" delivered in a tone that conveyed her clear disinterest. "Just seeking a meal," Gregory affirmed. The hostess arched a perfectly sculpted brow. "Do you possess a reservation?" He nearly scoffed. He knew the reservation book was fully booked for the evening, Yet he also understood that VIPs and generous tippers rarely encountered difficulty securing a table. He decided to play along. "No," he conceded, "but I had hoped you might have an opening." She sighed, tapping her deeply lacquered red fingernail on the screen. "It will be at least an hour." Gregory surveyed the room. He could discern at least 3 vacant tables. Tables he knew from experience were always reserved for walk-ins who appeared to be able to afford it. Before he could respond, a resonant voice interjected. "I'll handle this, Jessica." Gregory turned. A tall, broad-shouldered man in a crisp button-up stood behind the podium, arms crossed. His name tag declared him Manager Stephen Callow. Jessica, the hostess, stepped aside, visibly relieved to defer to her superior. Stephen subjected Gregory to a quick appraisal, then affixed a polite but utterly insincere smile. "Sir, as my hostess indicated, we are at full capacity this evening. I suggest exploring other dining options in the vicinity." Gregory stood firm. "I don't mind waiting." Stephen's jaw tightened. A fleeting expression, annoyance, perhaps even contempt, crossed his features. "Sir, we cultivate a specific ambience here. Most of our guests seek a particular kind of experience. If you're seeking something more casual, a diner is located a few blocks away." It was the dismissal he had anticipated, yet experiencing it firsthand was profoundly different. Gregory drew a slow breath, maintaining a neutral expression. He wouldn't argue. He wouldn't assert his authority. He was here to observe, to allow them to expose their own shortcomings. Before Stephen could insist on his departure, a new voice pierced the conversation. "I can assist him." Gregory turned, and for the first time that evening he beheld a genuine smile. She was young, perhaps in her mid-20s, with warm brown skin and expressive dark eyes. Her uniform was impeccably pressed, but a subtle weariness in her bearing suggested someone who toiled harder than she should for less than she deserved. Stephen sighed, clearly exasperated. "Jasmine, we don't have any open. The table by the window," she interjected. "It's vacant." Stephen's expression darkened, but Jasmine remained unyielding. She simply retrieved a menu, gestured for Gregory to follow, and led him past the disapproving stares and hushed whispers of the other staff. But as Gregory took his seat, he remained oblivious to the profound extent of this kindness, or the potential cost it would incur for her. Gregory settled into the windowside chair, the weight of the evening settling over him. The dining room hummed with hushed conversations and the occasional soft clinking of silverware, yet at his table only silence prevailed. Jasmine placed a menu before him, her demeanor warm yet professional. "May I get you something to drink?" Gregory's gaze fell upon the prices. He knew them intimately, of course, but perceiving them through the eyes of someone meticulously counting every dollar felt profoundly different. Even the most inexpensive glass of wine surpassed what some individuals earned in an hour. "Just water," he stated, hesitating before adding, "if that's acceptable." Jasmine didn't flinch. She simply nodded. "Of course." She vanished momentarily, returning with a tall glass which she gently placed before him. "Take your time with the menu. Please let me know if you have any inquiries." Gregory found himself at a loss for words. He had entered his own restaurant anticipating confirmation of its deficiencies, expecting to witness the cold indifference he'd been warned about. Yet here was this waitress, treating him as if he mattered, as if he belonged, even when his entire presentation suggested otherwise. He observed his surroundings. Other servers glided past his table without a second glance. They shared laughter with well-dressed patrons, poured wine with an elegant flourish, and leaned in attentively to record orders. But when their eyes flickered toward him, the expression shifted. Dismissive, uninterested. Jasmine was the sole individual who truly acknowledged his presence. When she returned a few minutes later, she leaned in slightly, her voice softer. "I don't wish to overstep, but..." She paused, then offered a small smile. "If you're uncertain what to order, I can bring out a small something on me." Gregory's throat tightened. He could have effortlessly spent hundreds on dinner without a second thought. But in this moment he allowed himself to envision a different reality. One where he genuinely was a man forced to choose between a meal and his next bus fare. He met her gaze. "You needn't do that." "I know," she replied simply, "but I wish to." She didn't wait for his protest. She moved toward the kitchen and moments later, reappeared with a bowl of soup and a piece of warm bread. The portion was modest, yet it was plated with the same meticulous care as the other dishes leaving the kitchen. Gregory stared at it for a moment before picking up the spoon. The soup was rich, perfectly seasoned, the bread soft and buttery. It wasn't about the food, however. It was about the profound fact that this woman, a waitress likely earning just above minimum wage, had prioritized kindness over judgment. He noted her name tag, Jasmine. He committed it to memory before he could utter another word. A sharp voice cut through the air. Jasmine, a moment. Stephen, the manager, stood by the kitchen entrance, arms crossed, his irritation palpable. Jasmine straightened. "I'll return shortly," she stated quietly before walking toward him. Gregory observed as she moved aside with Stephen. He couldn't discern the entire conversation, but he caught fragments. Wasting time. Barely a paying customer. Everyone deserves respect. Stephen's face contorted in frustration. He shot a piercing glare toward Gregory's table before muttering something under his breath and striding away. Jasmine exhaled before making her way back. She offered no comment on the preceding exchange, simply smiled and inquired if he required anything further. Gregory studied her for a prolonged moment. She possessed no knowledge of his identity, no inkling that she had just defended the very man with the power to alter her life. But soon she was about to discover the truth. Gregory sensed the palpable shift in the atmosphere as Jasmine departed. The kindness she had exhibited was not merely unusual. It was unwelcome, at least to those in charge. Stephen stood near the hostess podium, conversing in hushed tones with Jessica. Periodically, one of them would glance toward Gregory's table. He wasn't paranoid. He had participated in enough high-level business meetings to recognize when he was the subject of discussion. A few minutes later, Jasmine returned with a small plate of butter and additional bread. "Just in case you're still hungry," she offered with a faint smile. Before Gregory could express his gratitude, a different waiter, one he hadn't encountered before, appeared at the table. A young man with slicked back hair and a forced, artificial grin. "Excuse me, sir," he began, barely concealing his reluctance. "I merely wish to inform you that if you intend to order an entree, we require upfront payment for certain guests." The words were carefully chosen, but the underlying message was unmistakable. Gregory met the young man's gaze. "Certain guests." The waiter hesitated. "It's simply a policy we occasionally implement." "No, it isn't." Jasmine interjected before she could restrain herself. The waiter blinked as if astonished by her audacity. "Pardon me." Jasmine's jaw tightened. "We do not compel people to pay before they dine here." Gregory could see Stephen observing from across the restaurant, arms crossed, awaiting the unfolding drama. The young waiter shifted uncomfortably. "I was merely following. Allow me to guess," Gregory stated, setting his spoon down. "You don't ask him to pay up front?" He gestured toward a businessman in a tailored navy suit sipping from an expensive glass of wine. Silence. The waiter had no retort. He looked toward Stephen for guidance, but the manager offered a slight shake of his head, silent confirmation that he should simply retreat. With a forced chuckle, the waiter muttered, "Forget it," and vanished. Jasmine exhaled, then turned to Gregory. "I am so sorry about that. That should not have occurred." Gregory remained silent for a moment. He simply observed her. He saw the weariness in her eyes, the way she carried herself like someone accustomed to apologizing for circumstances beyond her control. "How long have you been employed here?" he inquired. Jasmine hesitated, then sighed. "Nearly 2 years." "And you enjoy it?" She offered a small smile. "I enjoy the customers." That single statement conveyed everything he needed to know. Before he could speak further, Stephen appeared. He wore a smile, but a sharp edge permeated his expression. "Jasmine," he stated in a voice laced with feigned patience, "may I see you in my office?" Jasmine glanced at Gregory before nodding stiffly. "Of course." She followed Stephen toward the rear of the restaurant, disappearing into a small hallway adjacent to the kitchen. Gregory remained seated, gripping the edge of the table. He could discern the faint murmur of conversation around him, the clinking of plates, the distant sizzle from the kitchen. But his entire focus was on what he had just witnessed. The way Jasmine was being treated for simply doing what was right, the way she had to contend just to serve him a meal like any other patron. He knew what was transpiring in that office. Stephen was reprimanding her, perhaps even jeopardizing her employment. Gregory clenched his jaw. This was not merely an isolated incident. It was a cultural malignancy, a problem that had festered within his company while he had been preoccupied with profits and expansion. But the essence of power was its ability to transform everything in an instant. And tomorrow, everyone in this restaurant would discover his true identity. The following morning, the Lancaster Grill commenced operations as usual. The staff bustled about, arranging tables, polishing silverware, and preparing for another evening of exquisite dining. No one harbored any inkling that this day would be different. Precisely at 6 p.m., Gregory Lancaster stepped through the front doors. Not in the tattered attire from the previous night, but in a meticulously tailored charcoal suit, impeccably polished shoes, and an unmistakable aura of authority. Jessica, the hostess, instantly straightened. Her expression transitioned from mild irritation to practiced warmth in a flash. "Good evening, sir. Welcome to the Lancaster Grill." Gregory offered no acknowledgement. His eyes swept across the dining room, seeking one individual, Jasmine. She was in the midst of placing a plate at a nearby table when she glanced up. Recognition struck her instantly. Her eyes widened, the color draining from her face. He knew. She knew precisely who he was now. The murmurs began almost immediately. Other waiters whispered amongst themselves, stealing glances at the sharply dressed man standing near the entrance. Even Stephen, who had just emerged from his office, froze upon seeing him. Gregory slowly traversed the room, his footsteps measured, deliberate. Every single person who had ignored him, dismissed him, or treated him as an unwelcome presence now stood at attention. He halted before Stephen, who was now rigid with apprehension. "Mr. Lancaster," Stephen finally managed, forcing a strained smile. "What an unexpected visit. Had I known of your arrival, we would have prepared. Do I appear to be a man who requires special treatment?" Gregory interrupted, his voice calm but resolute. Stephen hesitated. "No, sir, I merely meant," Gregory turned, surveying the staff. "How many of you knew who I was last night?" Silence. No one stirred. Jessica swallowed hard. The young waiter who had requested prepayment suddenly found something intensely fascinating on the floor. Gregory allowed the quiet to linger before he spoke again. "I came here last night seeking answers," he stated, his voice resonating through the restaurant. "I had been receiving complaints about the manner in which certain customers, were treated in my establishments. So I resolved to ascertain the truth for myself." The tension in the room was suffocating. He directed his gaze to Stephen. "And what I witnessed?" His tone darkened. "It appalled me." Stephen visibly paled. "Sir, I can explain." Gregory raised a hand. "There is nothing to explain. I observed my own staff disregard me. I was treated as an inconvenience. And when one person extended kindness, she was reprimanded for it." He turned toward Jasmine, his voice softening. "You defended me even when it was unnecessary, even when it could have cost you your livelihood." Jasmine opened her mouth, then closed it. She appeared overwhelmed, uncertain whether she was about to be dismissed or commended. Gregory allowed the gravity of the moment to settle before he spoke again. "You were the sole individual who upheld the fundamental principle upon which this restaurant was built," he declared, "to treat people with dignity." Then, without breaking eye contact, he extracted a card from his pocket and presented it to her. She hesitated before accepting it, her eyes scanning the text. "Promoted to general manager, effective immediately." The ensuing silence was deafening. Jasmine's breath hitched. I don't comprehend." "You do not belong waiting tables here," Gregory stated simply. "You belong leading this establishment." Across the room, Stephen emitted a strangled sound. "Sir, you cannot be serious." "I can and I am," Gregory affirmed, turning to him. "And you? You are terminated." Jessica gasped. The young waiter's jaw went slack. Stephen sputtered, "Mr. Lancaster, please. I have been employed here for—" Gregory cut him off. "You do not belong in a leadership role. Leadership demands character. And I do not reward individuals who bully their own employees and alienate paying customers." He turned toward the rest of the staff. "I advise the remainder of you to critically examine how you treat people. Because after tonight everything changes." The weight of his pronouncement settled over the room. Jasmine, still clutching the promotion card, looked up at him, tears welling in her eyes. "But why?" she asked softly. "Why this for me?" Gregory offered a faint smile. "Because when no one else did, you truly saw me. Now it is my turn to see you." And just like that, the Lancaster grill would be irrevocably transformed. The restaurant remained frozen in silence. No one dared to move. No one had anticipated this outcome, least of all Jasmine. Gregory watched as she gazed down at the promotion card in her hands, her fingers trembling slightly. The full impact of its weight, its significance was slowly registering. I don't know what to say," she finally whispered. He smiled. "Say yes." Jasmine blinked, looking around as if expecting someone to interject and declare it a jest. "But I've never managed a restaurant before," she admitted. "I mean, I understand the operations, but—" "You understand how people should be treated," Gregory interrupted. "And that is what truly matters." Jasmine swallowed hard. Her entire life had been marked by being overlooked, passed over for advancements, treated as if she were expendable. And now, the proprietor of the very company she served was telling her that she was not merely sufficient. She was the most qualified individual for the role. Her voice remained uncertain. "Are you certain?" Gregory's expression softened. "Jasmine, I have guided this company for years. I have amassed millions. But last night you reminded me of my initial purpose. It was never solely about accumulating wealth. It was about forging something meaningful. And if I cannot entrust someone like you to lead this establishment, then I have already failed." Her eyes glistened, but she blinked rapidly, straightening her shoulders. "Then, yes," she stated finally, her voice steady. "Yes, I will accept." The restaurant staff remained unsure how to react. Some appeared stunned, others nervous, particularly those who had disregarded Gregory the previous night. They understood that profound changes were imminent. Gregory turned to Stephen, who remained frozen in disbelief. "You may collect your belongings now," he stated evenly. Stephen clenched his jaw. "This is preposterous," he muttered under his breath. "All this over some random waitress." Gregory's expression darkened. "Her name is Jasmine, and that is the fundamental difference between you and her." Stephen stifled whatever retort he was about to make. Instead, he turned abruptly and stormed toward the back office. Jessica, the hostess, took a cautious step backward, visibly re-evaluating her life choices. Gregory drew a deep breath and turned back to Jasmine. "You commence tomorrow. But for now," he gestured toward the door, "take the remainder of the night off. Go celebrate." Jasmine hesitated. "Are you sure? I don't mind completing my shift." Gregory chuckled. "Jasmine, you are now the manager. You no longer require my permission." The realization seemed to strike her anew. A slow smile spread across her face, a blend of shock, disbelief, and perhaps for the first time in a long while, genuine pride. Gregory watched her depart, feeling something he hadn't experienced in some time: hope. Then he turned back to the rest of the staff, his voice calm but firm. "This restaurant is undergoing a transformation. Effective immediately, we will treat every customer with the same respect, regardless of whether they arrive in a suit or sneakers." The message was unequivocal. Some would remain, some would depart, but the Lancaster Grill would never operate in the same manner again. And as Gregory walked out that night, he knew one thing with absolute certainty. It wasn't merely a restaurant that had changed, it was himself as well. Some individuals extend kindness only when they anticipate a reciprocal benefit. But authentic kindness, the kind that reshapes destinies, manifests when no one is observing. Jasmine possessed no knowledge of Gregory's identity. She harbored no desire to impress a CEO. She simply acted in accordance with her deeply held beliefs, and that made all the difference. Therefore, the next time you encounter an opportunity to be kind, seize it. You never know who might be watching or whose life you might profoundly impact. If this narrative resonated with you, subscribe for more. There is always another lesson to absorb and another story to share.